continuing all through the month of October as we talk about some of the things people believe, whether they're true or not. Some things that people preach as absolutes, are they absolute? Sometimes absolutely not. Sometimes there are other alternatives. And my purpose in this month of getting together with you is not to necessarily disprove anything or to put anybody in their place by suggesting that the way they're doing it is wrong, but just to suggest that sometimes there's more than one way to skin a cat, and talk about the ways that I skin cats. So pardon in advance to all the cat lovers out there. Today's MythBusters topic of the day, if I can get, the reason I'm hesitating, I can get to my right screen here. Do I need to use headphones to do voiceover work? That's what we're going to cover. And specifically, what are the options? How can we monitor our work? There are at least two ways. Maybe there are more than two. We'll talk about that. We'll give you arguments for and against the use of headphones. And we'll give you arguments for and against the use of speakers. And then I'll talk to you about what I do and why I've chosen the path I'm on. As I mentioned, there are more ways than two to monitor. I come from a radio background, and in addition to listening with ears, we also in radio monitor with the eyes, more so than when we do voiceovers, where we tend to set it and forget it about audio levels. When we're broadcasting or engineering live audio, that audio may be coming from different sources. Besides the microphone, it may also be coming from a live sports event. It may be coming from a music source, and the levels can be all over the place. And so you have to be constantly monitoring your audio, not just with your ears, though you can tell a lot by that, but also by looking at volume unit measurements, VU meters. And so I have gotten over the years to the point where I can tell a lot by looking at VU meters where things are at. And also even the nature of what's being heard without actually hearing it. It's kind of easy to tell the difference, for example, between music and speech, when you're watching VU meters, especially these days when music is so highly compressed that it just the needle barely moves. It's just like holding right up there. So but in addition to the less obvious VU meters, there are other ways to monitor audio. One is through speakers, or traditionally called loudspeakers, though to me that's kind of a misnomer because they could be soft speakers too. This is like when you play a piano, they call it a piano. They used to call it a pianoforte, which was more accurate because it can be played both loud and soft. These days they just call it a piano. So a speaker, a loud soft speaker. So through, speakers, open coned speakers. And then there's headphones, which is kind of the main topic of the day. And that's what we want to discuss in more detail, greater length, and then contrast the two main ways, headphones and speakers. As we look back on radio, I did talk a little bit about the fact that VU meters can give you a strong indication of how much audio is pushing the signal. And this can be an important factor in radio because if you go too high up, you can actually, in radio, it's a little easier in some ways than it is even in digital production to exceed the absolute modulation level after which you get distortion. And traditionally that was called going into the red. If your needles, back then it was needles, and if the needles went too far over, they got into that red band, that was generally considered to be the point at which things will start to get distorted, though some professional gear was capable of handling some push into the red without getting distorted. In today's environment, as we do recordings, you must stay out of the red at all costs, because as soon as you go into the red, that indicates that you are in the clipping range. You're above 0 dB. With some professional radio gear, you could go up +1, +2, even +3 dB sometimes. You could hit it pretty hard before it would start to distort. Then, of course, there are speakers in radio stations. And there are also headphones in radio stations. So a radio station uses actually all three types that we talked about. The speaker, obviously, is when you want to listen overhead. A lot of times they'd be mounted overhead. And then there were the headphones that you'd have on. And you had to have basically all three types of monitoring in a radio studio, because in addition to watching the VU meters and riding your levels, as they called it, you also needed to be able to listen through speakers. Say if you're walking around the room, you can't necessarily have your headphones on, so you need to have the speakers to listen to. But then when you crack the mic, as they used to call it, in other words, flipping the switch to put yourself on the air, at that moment, what happens is that a little relay triggers inside the control board, and the relay shuts off the speakers. So just before the circuitry engages that would give you your microphone, you've already switched over your monitoring from the speakers to your headphone jack. And the result is that the audio goes into your headphones, but it doesn't go into the speakers. The reason for that is so you don't get, that feedback, that lovely feedback. If I've known people that listen so loud in their headphones, especially with the open air type headphones, the foam type, that actually you get that kind of the same sound as when someone has hearing aids and they start to feedback. You start to hear a little bit of that in the microphone. You can tell right away there's someone that likes their headphones loud. All right, so during DJ shifts, certainly with headphones, you had to have the headphones on while you were DJing, because as soon as you'd crack the mic, you didn't want to have the noise, the shrill feedback, the loop happening between the speakers and your microphone. All more than we probably needed to say on that topic, but I think it's kind of interesting, and it's my background in radio, so you have to forgive me that. Hi, Gus. Hi, Jim. Nice to have you. All right, so let's talk about headphones and some of the things about headphones that are considered pro or positive things. First of all, headphones are small. They're nice and lightweight. Heck, I've got some in my pocket right now that they're really small. Now, I wouldn't use those for production. These actually, these are AirPods. You can see those there. And when you put them in your ear, they come down out of your ear like this, so I call them melted hearing aids. That's what they kind of look like to me. But that's not what we're talking about either. We're talking about cans, the ones that go over your ears. A lot of times, what you want is one that's a closed type, so that it doesn't allow sound to pass out and get into your microphone, so a closed air type headphone. Though if you're not one who has really loud volume in your monitoring, sometimes you get by with more of an open air headphone. All right, so they're smaller. You can put them on a shelf, you can hook them on a hook, get them out of the way. And you can also, if you are working with a couple different computers, they're nice and easy to switch around, So you could plug them into your laptop, into your computer, potentially into a tablet even. Though that blows my mind to think of trying to do voiceovers on a tablet, but that's a topic for another day. Another benefit is that they can be kind of reassuring to people. When they put headphones on, it gives them a kind of a feeling of security. They know what they're sounding like. They get their headphones on, they can actually hear themselves coming back into their own ears. And it might be partially an ego thing, and it's partially probably a lack of ego thing. Because headphones can give you some instant reinforcement of what you sound like. And if you're not real experienced with your own voice yet, sometimes that little bit of extra assurance is nice to say, okay, this is what I'm sounding like. So there's that. You can hear yourself coming back into your own ears. It's also easier to hear minute detail in the audio. And that can be a plus and a minus, but it does give you the ability, for example, to tell, like when a vehicle's going by, that it's getting into your microphone, or that you can pick up, if you've got kind of closed air headphones on, sometimes that gives you the ability to pick up on any echo that you're picking up in the room. So it gives you a way to kind of identify any room issues that you're having. It also is an absolute must at a remote studio. So when I go and travel and record at studios in other cities, and they put me in a room, they're on the other side, the engineer's in his or her room, and I'm in my room. In order for them to talk to me, I've got to have my headphones on. I mean, potentially they could talk to me through a set of speakers, but it doesn't work out practically to do that. You don't have the mute switch that's going to turn the speakers on and off for monitoring purposes, and so it just makes a lot more sense. Also for talkback, when they're saying, okay, give me another take of that or whatever, for them to be able to just talk into your headphones rather than all of this messing around with speakers. So in that circumstance, headphones are an absolute necessity. And as I mentioned, they're also an absolute must for DJing for the reason of the feedback. And the other important consideration is that headphones are by nature less expensive. For the amount of money you spend, you get better reproduction for less money through headphones, though the reproduction is so precise in a way that it almost takes you over the edge. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now for the headphone cons. The list is smaller, but there are some things that I would mention. Number one, I remember sitting down one time in radio, and I was following a lady who had been on just before me. And without thinking, I just reached over and I put the headphones on, and it was so screaming loud that I felt like in that moment I had damaged my hearing permanently. It was that loud. Now, I don't know if she had it that loud or if she had bumped a knob or something in between, but when I put those headphones on, it was a bad situation. And so, again, if she was listening that loud all the time, I can't imagine that she ended up with much hearing left. There are musicians, who they'll have their monitors up pretty loud in their ears, and over time, if they're using the in-ear monitoring, they can really create a problem for themselves. And I'm sure there are voiceover people too that they feel like they need to hear so much of their own voice that they've got their voices blaring in their ears. And I'll even say this, that I have gone into studios where the previous voiceover talent that was in the booth had the volume set to their comfort level, and when I put the headphones on, it was like, whoa, So some people certainly do have their volume set really, really high, and it is possible to damage your hearing with headphones, so you have to really watch that. The other thing is that sometimes you can just get whacked. You've got your headphones on, and then you flip a switch or something, and it has an impact you weren't expecting, and suddenly the volume coming into your ears from an amp or from a monitoring box or from whatever it is 7 times louder, So I'm sure you've had a situation where all of a sudden the volume was just like, wah, and you had to pull the headphones off. So there's the hazard involved with headphones. There's also this, that when we listen in headphones, we're really not listening the way most end users are going to hear what we do. We're listening with a more critical ear, which is good, but we're listening to a representation of the sound that is so finite, so fine-grained, that we're not really hearing it the way the end user is going to hear it in the final product, whether that's a training video or a promotional video or a commercial or whatever it is. This fine-grained detail can create a problem for some people because, it's kind of like ironing. It's kind of like me with ironing. My daughter would laugh at me about this because she knows what I'm like. I can never be done ironing a shirt because there's always just one more little wrinkle. And so listening in headphones for me it's a little torturous. It's a little like, ironing a shirt. I never feel like it's ever quite good enough because I'm hearing every little teeny, tiny thing. So it adds to editing time. It adds to the number of takes that you do, probably in some cases. And if you are one of these people who already finds yourself spending an awful lot of time getting a voiceover right, adding this extra layer of complexity and exasperation to what you do can sometimes maybe put you over the edge. Just make it almost impractical to do voiceovers because it takes so much time to get it to where you feel like it's good enough. The other thing for me, and this is really the most significant thing for me, is that they're very uncomfortable to me. When I first put them on, I'm good. And actually, I had another pair that I sold to one of the group members in one of our Fiverr groups because they were just too tight, had too big of a head. So he must have had a Martin, I think it was, Marty. I sold them to, and he's real happy with them, but they were just too small for me, and they were just like cramping my head. So these are lighter, and they do a fine job in terms of being comfortable. They cover my ears just right. They've got nice padding. They're fairly soft padding. They seal around your ears, so you're not going to have sound leaking through. And so from every standpoint there, the audio quality is excellent. But I'll tell you that after 15 minutes with those on, I'm uncomfortable. They're warm. They make my ears itch inside. I want to take them off and they are, I even believe that, when you're doing a long shift, say like hours and hours of voiceovers, it's probably not even the most healthy thing for your ears to be blocked in like that for so long. You can get earaches, you can get headaches, you can get ear infections, I think, too. And that takes me on to another whole thing, which is, let's see, is that coming up here? No, I'm going to back up. Another thing is in radio, a lot of times it was community headphones. There'd be one pair of headphones in the studio, and everybody would sit down to do their shift, and those would be the headphones that they'd be using. So Lord help us, it's amazing we didn't all end up with horrible earaches and stuff. And there were some guys that would actually, take some alcohol and swab the headphones out before they used them. And I always thought they were kind of extreme. And when I think about it now, I don't know if maybe I might have done the same thing, but it got to the point where I think people started to get wise to that, and they'd start to bring in their own headphones. But that was a thing too. So I think there can be the potential for health problems with headphones. I don't want to overstate that, and I'm no expert on it. But just knowing what the impact it has on my own ears, I wonder if for some people it may be not only just irritating, but maybe because there's no air movement for a period of time, for months, for hours, that it could cause some problems. So speakers, some of the pros of speakers. When we listen to speakers, we're listening the way most people are going to hear whatever it is that we're recording, if that makes sense. Now, granted, there will be people that will listen to stuff like through headphones, and maybe you're going for a walk and you're listening to an app, or you're listening to a podcast, or you're listening to a radio stream. But frequently, people are going to listen back through speakers. The other thing is that most of the time they're not going to be listening back to raw audio, meaning just speech with no music, no production, no processing. And so when you listen back through speakers, especially when it's raw audio, the speakers are a little more forgiving of some of the finest minutia, the fine-grained little details, so that you're really hearing it a lot closer, I think, to what people are going to hear it in the end. I think by listening through speakers, we're going to be less prone to obsess over every little tiny detail in the recording. That's not to say that we want to overlook problems, but sometimes a problem isn't a problem unless it's a problem. So this may reduce the time for doing voiceovers for some people. And I think that people will be less likely then to twiddle and tweak and iron and iron and iron. Cons for speakers. I think it's harder to detect room problems when you're using speakers because of what I would call double echo. let's say that I've recorded my voice. When I recorded my voice, my microphone picked up me and whatever room noise there was, echo. Now I go to play it back, and I play it back through the speakers. Well, the speakers are now going to play back my original recording and any echo that it picked up while playing it back into the room that was already echoing, so we have echo twice. So now, how do I tell how much of the echo was in the recording and how much of the echo is in the playback? So that's a little bit of a problem. So when you're setting up a room, I think it makes a huge amount of sense to listen independently and in as closed an environment as possible and a reasonably loud volume to see, okay, what am I getting here? What am I really getting? So with speakers, it's a little less easy to hear small issues in the audio too. So sometimes maybe a little mouth noise might not quite get into your ears. You may not pick it up. The other thing is that speakers are more expensive by a factor of 4 or 5 in a lot of cases. It just depends on the speakers that you get. But certainly if you were to spend $100 on a pair of headphones or $100 on a pair of speakers, you're going to get much better reproduction out of the headphones than you will out of the speakers. That starts to even out as you start going up in price. But you are farther away from the speakers, even if they're good ones. And depending on how your room is, it may be that you still would have better monitoring capabilities with headphones than speakers. So by now you're probably saying, okay, Dane, well, where do you come in on this whole thing? Well, part of my answer is that it isn't an either-or proposition. You can have the best of both worlds here. You can use headphones, and here I'm just describing what you can do. I'm not saying what you should do or what you should change what you're doing. Okay, so, but you can use headphones when you want to hear fine detail, and speakers when you want to hear what the world will hear. And to expand on that a little bit, when you go into professional studios, they'll have sometimes 2 sets of speakers. One good set of kind of big, like big bookshelf speakers. Those are their pro ones. Those are the high-end, expensive ones. And then they'll sometimes have a smaller set of speakers that are sitting there so they can flip the output back and forth between the two. The purpose of the 2 small speakers is to hear what it's going to sound like in a car or in another consumer audio device where they would tend to have small speakers. And this gives them a better perspective on how things really are. You know, this just goes back again to the whole theory that we want to, at some point, be able to monitor our content, our product, in a way that people are going to be monitoring it, rather than just listening to it in this pristine laboratory kind of environment that we'll hear inside a closed set of speakers up to our ears. So now, what do I do and why? I do have headphones. I put them on for the occasion here. These are Sony. They call them just Sony Professional. I honestly don't remember the make, the exact make. There were some that I had read were good for the price, and so I got those. I'm going to put those up here now. And then I have speakers. And actually, now that I think about it, I've got this picture up on the screen here. It shows both. So these are the Sony headphones, and then these are the speakers. The speakers are Audio Engine A5s, and they are a good professional speaker. They're not a real high-end speaker, but they're, you know, I don't know, they're $500-600 idea for a pair of them, so they're not cheap. This particular one has bamboo wood, which is kind of cool. But this is one of these things where I worked through a couple little tiny computer speakers for years, so it isn't like you have to immediately go out and buy the most expensive thing. I got to the point where I could afford it, so I did it. But I actually, I think in the Gig Winners course, I go through and I describe kind of a shopping list of different products that you could get for doing voiceovers inexpensively, and there's a set of speakers that are reviewed in there that might be worth looking at that are nowhere near what these things cost. My primary tool for monitoring is speakers all the way. And this is not an indictment of people that use headphones, but I've just reached the point where I have discovered that I really don't need headphones other than for very specific purposes. And as a result, my headphones gather dust, literally gather dust. Sometimes I won't put them on for months. Just the main thing I use headphones for at this point is for setup. Say I'm getting a new piece of gear and I want to check levels, check output, listen to the noise floor, things like that. Or if I've recorded something that's very picky-unish and I want to listen to it really closely, I'll put the headphones on, bring them up a little bit. When it comes to anything else that I need to scrutinize, I already know what my room sounds like. I know what my mic sounds like. I know what my voice sounds like. I'm familiar enough with myself, my equipment, and my environment that I don't really have to rely on monitoring that much anymore, because these things don't change. My voice is going to be pretty much the same from day to day. The mic isn't changing at all. The room is essentially never changing. It's always about the same dynamics. The amount of external noise is going to be pretty much all the same. When the furnace is running, we're going to have furnace running, so I have to shut that off. I just happen to know that. Having the headphones on isn't going to change that situation. When I hear when I hear the furnace come on, I've got to just go and get that turned off. So that's all there is to that. So if you know yourself, if you know your own voice, if you're comfortable enough in your own vocal skin, so to speak, that you don't need to have the reinforcement of hearing yourself coming back through your ears, and if you're confident enough about your own tech, your own equipment, your own environment, that you realize that, okay, it's either going to be fine because I've tested it with headphones on and know that it's fine, or that it's not fine and I need to do something about it, at that point, headphones become almost a secondary idea. And at that point, you can allow yourself the comfort, and I stress the comfort of no headphones and just being able to just listen through speakers. I was in radio for 20 years, and after 20 years of headphones, this boy is way happy not to have to wear headphones. So, when do I use them? I talked about this a little bit. I'll just review. When I'm setting up new gear, when I want to hear things minutely, when I'm listening back hypercritically to a recording for something, when I'm listening to a component that isn't patched into my main speaker output. Say I've got a computer over on the side and I want to just plug into the output jack and listen to it, but it's not plugged into my main system. And when I'm out listening to audiobooks, but in that case, it's this little guy instead. So I'm not opposed. By the way, I will say this. These babies right here, I love them. You would not think that something shiny and plastic like that would fit in the ear so well, but you cannot. I can't shake these things out. They're awesome. I prefer actually these now to the ones that have all the plastic or the cushiony stuff on them, because it always feels like you're kind of chucking a wad of cotton into your ear with those. So these have a little bit of an open, free feeling to them, and I'm just more comfortable with them. So when I'm out doing audiobooks, yeah, then I'm also wearing headphones, but that's not voiceover and that's not production. Why do I prefer the speakers again? It's just to review here. It's for comfort. It's for the real world experience of hearing how things are going to sound to the end user. I don't need to hear my voice to know what I sound like anymore. I know my room. I like the idea that maybe this is better for health. And did I mention comfort? All right, well, here's something I'm very comfortable about, and I would love for you to get a comfort level with it too, because I think that this is something everybody needs to be doing. It is Newton's Apple. That's the nickname I have for Head Slapper 4, and this is my tally board. I just created this morning at about, 4 o'clock in the morning. What was I doing up then? So I just created this artwork today, and I'm going to update those little ticker numbers on there from day to day on our Facebook page. What this amounts to is I'm showing people how much I've earned since September 10th, 2020, when I first started, thereabouts. It was about September 10th, when I started the new technique that I'm now talking about in Head Slapper 4. Within a week or 10 days of doing this, it was so obvious to me that this was something that everybody ought to be doing that I immediately started on a video about it. So Head Slapper 4 came online really fast after I started doing it. And if I had said, okay, well, I jumped the gun on that. It's really not that big of a deal after all. I wouldn't have kept up on it. I've just taken it down. But honestly, this is the best head slapper of the bunch so far, I think, in terms of the potential for income for anybody who's doing voiceovers. And actually, even for people who are doing some other forms of media, but certainly for voiceovers. If you're not doing this, you're literally leaving money on the table. I would almost say you're getting ripped off. So I would suggest that you think seriously about getting this. So far, I'm at $550, and that number will be up in another day or two for sure. If you go to thegigdoctor.com/headslappers, it's $49.95, and honest to goodness, it'll be a good investment for you. So get it. Gigdoctor.com, thegigdoctor.com/headslappers. And tomorrow is the 30th, and that will be the final one. So we have one more of our MythBusters, and then we'll be concluding October. November is going to be fun. We'll be doing some interviews, talking about character voices and foreign voices and a number of other things. So don't go anywhere. Be around for November. We won't be doing them every day in November, but when we do them, they're going to be high interest and a lot of fun. That's going to do it for today's feed. Thanks to everyone for watching.